I'll be reading excerpts from my thesis comics, including story summaries to better express my hypothesis of reclaiming the visionary mind. These are like the parables and musings of some sacred text, expressing its layered narratives. I'll put the link to my lecture, Reclaiming the Visionary Mind, in the playlist or in the presentation. I'm reading Guesswork of the Gods. This is the first chapter. Two eyes peered down onto a pulsating stain on a shimmering floor. The eyes were deep and dark like the universe and belonged to a tea-complexioned man. He was tall, sturdy, and smoothly dark like a palm tree. God's palm tree. Predating descriptions like racial minorities, brown people, or people of color, which really means non-white in Eurocentric social caste systems. He initially looked down on this ink block-like stain, thinking aloud, no matter how careful you are, you'll eventually step on dog shit. It almost got me this time. He stepped over it, but looked closer. He was hypnotized by its putrid colors, as if they were a collection of failed rainbows. Somehow he knew that they got entangled because of their conflict to be one, as opposed to merging. The stain pulsated and grew, or maybe his gaze caused him to shrink into it. These very patterns, which subliminally appeared to be distorted, repulsive, and primitive people and architecture, became more proportioned and symmetrical, seductive. He became entranced as the patterns became sleek, futuristic skyscrapers, spacecraft, and towering, well-toned gods and goddesses. For a split second before his descent, he saw how these beings, cities, and worlds merged with the very grungy, disjointed formations of mildew that encased them. He saw to the depth that he could perceive many conflicting futures and arrested beginnings, understanding how and why various life forms and entities, whether humans, animals, so-called gods, aliens, and superhumans, came to be and what drove them. Who would have thought that the very intermediary material catalyst to their ultra-physical evolution would bring so many complications? Who would have thought that choosing, or rather gambling, to be a certain color, element, pattern in a particular environment and space-time, something as lowly and insignificant as the cesspool of spit that he came across, could bring such agonizing emotions like confusion, self-doubt, hatred, jealousy, frustration, and chaos to the very inhabitants vying for prestige, honor, validation, and status there. In fact, were these the highest ambitions to strive for? How could gambling to be a red dot in a sleek crevice equate to someone being born to a rich family, or being the very chunky rock that caused that crevice equate to being a god, or being an elongated, smooth fabric which on the surface appears to be the most stable, majestic, and healing material mean that you're a slave? How could the most attractive, intricate, and expansive all-connecting objects, whether branch-like silver rods or gold feathery tufts, equate to you being ugly, stupid, and disadvantaged? How could a flexible yet sturdy nylon-like strand of cloth equate to you being aroused by a sexy body part like a thigh or butt? Though the inhabitants of this world thought themselves to either be superior, gifted, or inferior to each other, they appeared to him as either being healthy or undeveloped selves. Even the healthy ones were compromised. You could learn more from the entanglements, the arrested development of the unhealthy ones, and their potential to form healing patterns, according to the unrealized whole they encircled. Suddenly, unknown notions came to him. He labeled them astrology, science, religion, following one's dream, love, and other dynamics yet to be, though he didn't know what these terms meant yet. The same thing happened moments before when he didn't know what a man, Latino, or anything was. He rationalized that these esoteric higher educational systems were futile attempts to navigate all corresponding realities. Yet he knew they were essential to co-shaping a boundless environment of no compromise for eternal identities beyond race, ethnicity, and class. He understood everything in a moment that seemed to contain all of time. He knew the answer, the way, on a level beyond belief and knowledge, before crashing down face first on the pavement of this microcity, immersed in a white darkness. Stud Creep, a Metin man, is a resident of the final society. It was deemed to be the endpoint of civilization, because there were no more mysteries or frontiers to explore, nor new things to invent, or so they were told by the elite. All citizens in the hierarchy had privilege, even the lowliest, like the Metin men and women. These well-chiseled, dirty bronze anthrobots had apartments, some education, and access to cosmic powers. But Stud Creep saw reality with a different eye, as if some invisible hand placed 20D glasses on him. A white darkness came over him as he scrutinized the traffic. Silver projectile-like spacecraft and other interchangeable vehicles hovered over and zoomed across the wide yet claustrophobic streets. They looked so cool before, now they seemed to be a waste of technology and energy. He felt that this omni-technology was just 20% of what we could do if we just knew how. Somehow he knew he could do more empowering things than the muscle-bound, towering gods and goddesses, celebrities who performed their great intellectual and supernatural feats before the stunned crowds of angels, superheroes, demigods, and other entities. The glittering crowds applauded the giants who levitated skyscrapers and wielded mounds of clay across the night sky as if comets, breaking record after record in throwing, lifting, and other tests of power and mind. But he sacrilegiously frowned upon their accomplishments. There was always some grand exhibition, and Metin people and other beings always flocked to see the latest invention of an ultra genius, or some reality-shifting competition between titans. These inventions ranged from transformer-like robo-titans firing pulsar rays in perpetual irresistible force versus immovable object tests, to fortress-like megacomputers which could warp time and space on exterior levels, giving the illusion of deeper but false realities being uncovered. All they did was open one Pandora's box after the other, pressuring the hypermagnetic yet ultimately enclosed world system from imperceivable angles. These geniuses, or gods in the making, often pitted their devices against the super technologies of the god heroes or superheroes in an attempt to elevate their status. The masses followed certain gods, often debating whose god hero was superior, but the fanatics overlooked the very electromagnetic and digi-gravitational terrors these petty pedantic displays of power, ego, and innovation produced, terrors which were threatening to rip their utopia to pieces. But the overlords didn't ignore this. This is why they hoped to inspire their populace with these displays, so that they could recruit new omega quantity mathematicians, 4D to 5D engineers and beyond, and others adept at maintaining a dwindling trans-electromagnetic reality. This is also why the gods created a benign caste system based upon the data of their trans-eugenics research. You couldn't give everyone an equal chance at competing, as opposed to succeeding, in such an unpredictable, imbalanced game which sought to tame a chaotic universe with strategic gambling as opposed to other ways. It was far too difficult to balance the system around stable, self-aware, well-educated individuals, even though this liberal idea that was concocted by groups long erased from history and beyond was forgotten. The gods were convinced that if there was one final great code, equation, idea, invention, it was more likely to present itself through the careful breeding of genes and minds. However, all citizens were given a chance at learning higher knowledge, according to the dogma of the God heroes. If you couldn't grasp this knowledge within one or two lessons, you weren't fit. So don't blame the gods for not having some concern. Stud Creek could never grasp the basics of 4D dynamics or perfect the katas of 4D martial arts. That's why he worked as a tool model for Tech Corp, rather than follow his dream to be a 4D realm architect and champion fighter, multi-dimensional fighter. He tried other things, following typical advice like never give up. You can do anything you put your mind to, and you'll have your day. Though his initial dreams stemmed from a drive that he's just beginning to understand, to co-shape reality, not just support it like some anonymous, crumbling, dispensable pillar. Blasphemous for such a lowly entity to think, right? Metan men aren't capable of having such thoughts, so how could he think them? A shadowy figure with Stud Creep's proportions, covered by white darkness, struggled to rise from a shimmering floor after stepping on a stain with no corridors, as if figuring his way out of that void path. The multi-dimensional world he inhabited was a virtual computer-simulated reality which had merged with matter, hence becoming real. Here the matrix is part organic. That's the true mindfuck. It was manufactured by his ancestors, the humans, the quantum computer engineers and AI designers, along with interdisciplinary scientists in biology and anthropology. It was a final attempt to save humankind from climate change and a war-stricken, irradiated Earth. People knew that they could consciously plan out their next lives according to their talent or ability to visualize ideal realities. Sounds like a liberal idea, planning out your reality, but that was undermined. Yet the top minds of an imbalanced, collapsing world still edited the wish lists of the populace, ignoring anything that they didn't understand or that challenged their knowledge and greater experience, exposure. They planned everything out for the populace according to their immediate experience, tradition, heritage, bloodline, and education. A bloodline which the elites corrupted, ironically. What complicated this was that the gods forgot much of human knowledge and history, which itself was incomplete during their consciousness shift. Protest and dissent was futile, since most people, especially those with some privilege, still thought crime, war, violence, and other destructive aspects of human nature was inevitable. The best you can do is create a freer environment. If you didn't know how to be a true god, then you lacked the ability. Never mind that the experts lacked the ability to see the divine in its infinite forms. Be lucky to be a hobo in the ultimate reality. Better luck next time. I'll be reading a brief parable in its entirety called Freer Will, Not Free Will. Freer Will, Not Free Will. The struggle between the extra-dimensional novans, synonymous with non-violent, and vions, violent, was changing tides finally. Like the now dominant Red Sox, the peace-loving novans seemed cursed from getting the better of the cosmic struggle. The lying, cheating, aggressive vions seduced humankind with their quick fixes of greed, war, conflict, gossip, and competition. Considering the great historical casualties of war, poverty, and disaster, evil lives supreme. What does live mean in reverse? I've been saying this for years before I was aware of recent spiritual people who've been saying the same. So, the Novans decided to interfere with our supposed free will by altering our sense of reality for the better, encouraging us to see things which we overlook. Why not? The Vions have been doing this for centuries, infiltrating our religions, culture, academia, media, and even thoughts. The Novans did this with perceptual quantum shifting, conducting healthy optical illusions. They could control our perception and make us experience something entirely different to the event we thought we were participating in. Though paradoxically, they could do this because all moments, good, bad, misguided, etc., are driving at the same thing, infinite and intimate connections. So the Novans are practicing mind liberation as opposed to mind control, encouraging us to see what's always there. For example, there was over 100 people at the public library, reading area. Students, researchers, homeless, either working on their laptops or reading well-worn books. Nobody spoke to each other because they're strangers. You don't know who to trust, right? Everyone should mind their own business. But the Novans quantum shifted this vast public space into a communal party. Everyone knew what their goals and seemingly conflicting activities were driving to as they got to know their neighbors, the actual people which literary and cinematic archetypes embodied and had watered down into stereotypes. They understood why they were caught up with seeking opportunities for better jobs for elevating one's status, for gaining more possessions, and for traveling. But what was all this getting at? Human connection? Now people found the exotic culture, fantastic world, intriguing characters, heart-stopping drama, comic relief, and so on, which they sought in books, movies, vacations, and petty elitist networks, always being cancelled. But this shared hallucination was a preview, and everybody woke up, going back to doing their thing. Very few remembered it, but everyone ignored each other less as they departed one by one. The seeds for change were planted. There were many big events happening the following weekend. The Super Bowl, the Nancy Rodriguez concert, and a Black Friday-like sale at the local computer store. Teens, college students, hipsters, and intergenerational social vets drove miles in freezing weather. They stood hours in line, warmed and stimulated only by coffee, anticipation, and hype. Despite the shoving and line cutting, there was a surprising amount of goodwill, cooperation, and generosity displayed. People watched over the kids of parents who had to get more money from the ATM or food from the mart. They also bought food and drinks to the Good Samaritans. Many bonded over the trivia of their favorite teams, and girls, not just Latina, lamented how the sexy, hip, yet all-wise, radical, feminist, but not anti-male Nancy inspired them so. There was some unifying undercurrent for sure. But these big media events were quantum shifted into acts of social activism in another reality. The same efforts people put in enduring cold weather, traveling for miles in dense traffic, and for making shrewd deals with fast-talking retailers were translated into articulating social needs and concerns for more equitable economies and more personalized, balanced educational and health systems to seemingly indifferent politicians. They expressed their need for more balanced educational and health systems to indifferent politics. People felt the same unity of rooting for their home team and their triumphs when they made a successful revolution. Selfishness became translated into sacrificing yourself for less compromising rewards, such as unlimited access to education, goods, housing, and other of life's buffet, while contributing in a less compromising manner as well. Autonomy, not duty. But the crowds forgot this vision, believing more in Hollywood, pop culture, video games, virtual realities, and other material idols instead. However, the invisible seeds for change, kind of pre-seeds, were already planted with that vision. That's why the crash wasn't so bad after this event-filled weekend was over. Monday sounded like fun day, and the hangover wasn't so bad. The Novans weren't sure where it was headed now, but even these light beings felt less heavy, while the Vions were more frustrated than ever at their inability to crush the human spirit. Some things will always remain beyond the narrow calculation and super efficient, beyond their narrow calculation and super efficient time manipulating technologies and mind control. So this is the backstory behind the Novans and Vions. Another excerpt. There's some phenomena occurring beyond facts and illusions, beyond the scope of news broadcasts, opinion polls, online radio, interviews with experts discussing climate change, terrorism, global policies, or the opinions of the befuddled citizenry who can only agree or disagree, or agree to disagree as opposed to refusing to see, with the few options presented to them by the establishment. Is voting for so-and-so good? Should we support this war, be tougher on crime, build the wall? All of which can lead to more job security. I can't say what this event is or know how it will happen. It may be occurring now in slow motion. In 50 years, we'll recognize it as the turning point. I wrote this in 2018 before COVID and all that stuff. So, the Novans and Vions, my characters, archetypes, or spiritual kindreds, ultimately, what's the difference, will help me as I describe this in terms of being narrators. When making predictions, people tend to focus on sinister scenarios, but I'm simultaneously exploring two scenarios via the duel between these forces, presenting the best case scenario that the worst one is trying to become, ironically. For example, an economic collapse can easily be converted into an all-inclusive, restorative, grassroots, bottom-up revolution in this sense. High techno surveillance can be shifted into an open, compassionate society with a telepathic-like transparency, and criminal profiling can be learning to see and encourage others' humanity. The base struggle is not between good and evil, but fear and trust, totalitarianism and harmony. Totalitarianism is the fearful, forceful way to achieve unity, while harmony is all attracting and self-correcting. The Novans, again synonymous for nonviolence, are orchestrating a nonviolent conspiracy in response to the violent one conducted by the Violent. Both races are light beings, or sentient holograms, by our sense, representing our future selves, real and unreal, both real and unreal, probabilities, sentient probabilities. They're simultaneously spirits, angels, aliens, and other entities. But this is where it gets perplexing because it's misleading to label them as good and evil, light and dark beings, angels and fallen angels. They may be the same race. Some light beings, because they were blinded by their own brilliance, got lost in the darkness of the necessary fall or inevitable separation before matriarchal material history, maternal, which mirrors the complications of our physical evolution, essential for our ongoing progress and knowledge. It's possible that heaven, God consciousness, perfection exists in the no-time zone. Everything that we want to be has been realized and continues to be realized in a multi-layered influx infinity of fluid forms, the multi-moments. But to fathom this non-consciousness, we needed to be exposed to dualities, polarities, so material reality came into existence. In some sense, we're still in a prologue or pre-reality. Some people state we didn't have to fall had we adhered to the natural order. This rings of Puritanism and conservatism, a trendier, more futurist way of saying you're going to burn in hell if you don't follow your free will and follow the way, as opposed to having will follow you freely. But something's not right. Perhaps things came to be because reality wasn't aware of its own existence on some trippy level. Infinite space and emptiness needed to be aware of the very intersecting dimensions necessary to flesh out its all-loving heart, all-nurturing heart, body, and nourishing multi-environments. There is no beginning or end, just infinity. That's why we can't fathom pre-existence or death. We were all one in anonymous form once, but we need to be self-aware ones within a communal one, multi-dimensional beings residing in a multiverse. I symbolically understand this, for me anyways, as being a soul and solution solving. Souls that border gods, angels, demons, aliens, and other consciousness, hence reconciling the rifts, like someone integrating or balancing the positive and negative selves so they could be fuller souls or symbiotic gods. But this doesn't necessarily mean being God, rather having partnership with the godly sentient medium which permeates and embraces all. It's not about playing God, but communing with and enjoying a playful force. Co-mastery with the master art medium which always creates masterpieces. But we can co-create with it also. Perhaps we have the potential to envision as much as infinity as we believe we can, like the quantum observer phenomena. It's dark matter revealing and deepening in light energy, according to our desires, needs, hopes, beliefs, ideas. Does it matter if I'm off or inaccurate or whatever, if I'm not with these scientific metaphors, but I think I'm on the right track. This allows us to personalize the ineffable. It becomes familiar, like our own homes. We can invite guests, spiritual kindreds, form deep relationships, travel to other homes, realms, multiverses. Teleportation and interdimensional travel becomes a freer, more surreal version of train travel or other form of physical transportation. The 3D world is stimulating us to envision a multidimensional fluctuating reality in a familiar and assuring way, like simultaneously writing, playing, and observing the very fantastical movies, video games, and cartoons we see now in design, which are meant to catalyze our transcendent sense. As for the vions and novons, when the Big Bang happened, or something like it, dormant, perhaps unforeseen safety mechanisms appeared and stabilized the very vast info flood, which is essential to know the freest way and flesh out all realities in a manner that can awaken the sleeping universe. These mechanisms, which I visualize as towering primal ego blocks, were necessary evils that are now unnecessary. Evil does not want to exist. Evil does not want to exist. They're training wheels on bikes that can be discarded, like many of our outmoded fundamental systems and technologies. This vast info flood contains sentient particles which can catalyze all kinds of life and environments via bacteria, radiation, and so on. This jump-started many ongoing evolutionary processes of galaxies, planets, humans, animals, and other consciousness. The novons and vions, including multitudes of other spiritual kindreds, these seemingly advanced beings may have either appeared parallel to, that these seemingly advanced beings may have either appeared parallel to or after humans and all physical life appeared, yet by their relative timelines closer to source, they experienced many probable futures, not the all-central zenith, which we can envision and co-create better than light beings from the future. In some warped way, humans may be the center of creation, despite being among the lowliest, per our ability to think in extremes and exposure to choice and consequence, para-catalyzing other consciousness that were more advanced in particular polarities to appear. We have the potential to encourage all sentient beings, higher and lower, to evolve into some cosmic family. But the Novans, driven by pure survival instinct, are convinced that they must mentor the humans on how to master Earth, since it'll preserve their compromised existence. Despite what many spiritualists say, again, I believe all sentient consciousness is driven by some common drive to thrive, the sum total of all needs, which is the sum total of all needs. Again, evil does not want to exist, and ultimately there may be no angels, devils, heroes, villains, just sentient beings who either follow their highest conscience or lowest, according to the few options available. Maybe carnivorous animals will evolve as well, even if they go extinct, appearing in another higher form. Even corrupt bacteria, viruses, particles, beings want to be more whole, healthier, despite their parasitic impulses. Physically, we evolved from healthy bacteria, so spiritually we're constantly metabolizing trans-environmental forces. This mirrors our earthly conflict to be one as opposed to merging, where sociopaths, fascists, racists, criminals, and diseases like cancer think they're doing what's necessary to thrive. But it may not be impossible to establish peace and understanding, reconciliation between everyone and all things if we can learn to see reality with a multidimensional perspective. Even the elite and corrupt will be forced at some point to admit that they need all components of the social body. This understanding may happen in a paradoxical way, all opponents internalizing each other's lessons via their biases or systems. Religious fundamentalists will grasp scientific atheistic ideals within the oracle-like verses of their sacred texts, and vice versa with the rationalists, who recognize sentient phenomena within their scientific findings, and on and on. No one will be converted, but they'll appreciate the whole
some
via
of
the
the
broadening of their
duels
biases.
between the Vions and Novans. Again,
The peace may
it could
never
be
happen in this
simplified.
lifetime or even in our reality, but I'm
Evil is
convinced
trying to
that
be something
we
healthy,
will all
so
understand
that's what the
someday.
Novans understand. So this is, if ultimate reality can be likened to some sentient ocean in which it feels every drop of water, then the Vions, the violent ones, can replicate this and create some fluid omni-technology operating on sheer memory. Every drop of water contains the ocean's properties, the cosmic ocean, its life, plants, algae, chemicals. So the Vions can encode synthetic entire armies, artificial intelligences, synthetic diseases, environments, whole worlds, persons, within their chemically engineered electromasses. These masses can shrink, expand, vanish within seconds. Think a combination of two supermutations. John Carpenter's The Thing and the T-1000 from Terminator 2. Their distortion of our even vaster, healthier potential for shape-shifting and interdimensional travel through symbiotic roots. But the Novans can counter this by maintaining their godly perspective of the harmonious whole. They simplify the most foreboding scenarios into miniaturized virtual environments, seeing the many ways a mess can be contained, like neutralizing a flood in a dollhouse, according to its own confining compartment. A plague of roaches can be flooded out or trapped, or the cracks from which they crawl out can be sealed. Is everything predetermined? Then there's no hope if this is true. Don't despair. The cosmos is so paradoxical in its seeding, in protection against its own evaluation also, that the most unlikely people, those in the underclass or inferior, are more likely to be conduits for information beyond the evaluation of eugenics. Genetic research should encourage ordered chaos or pleasant surprises to form unique epigenetic codes, not selective breeding, which stunts human potential at the expense of narrow efficiency. All kinds of cool military gadgets can act as virtual police, already envisioned by many visionaries. But the peaceful yet all-powerful Novans could have a say. They tune us in to they tune us into the illuminating orb-like rays of the very perceptual universe, hidden manifolds bordering dark matter and probable dimensions, which represent the origami-like patterns for origami-like patterns for a variety of interconnecting supersymmetries, possible worlds, and more synergistic cosmic cycles. These rays, beamed by a dormant sentient omniverse which mirrors our collective superconsciousness, can catalyze us to see deeper with our minds. This also stimulates our latent cosmic DNA beyond the evaluation of fascist technology. We'll be so attuned to our surroundings and self-aware and vice versa that we'll become many times more visionary, using our technology in a nature-sensitive way, manifesting an all-seeing system based on transparency, not surveillance, in league with our social clairvoyance. The Vions might use mind-bending attacks to further confuse us and keep us in a state of helplessness. They may use a variation of the perceptual phenomena that causes humankind to experience a collective Twilight Zone-like experience or hallucination, like what occurred in my story, the babble of changing perceptions, which forces everyone to agree to a common perspective and language in order to make sense of the changing environment. The Vions use geophysics technology, movie screen or green screen, movie projector ray guns to create shifting, inverting force fields. Perhaps these cause the atmosphere to warp into holographic landscapes, causing people to get lost in hallucinatory Bermuda Triangle-like environments. These psychic attacks can be used to make people think that the world is ending, to experience an apocalyptic natural disaster. Again, this is the story. See paranormal phenomena, holograms of ghosts, aliens, UFOs that may have been manufactured by the Vions and their intelligence agencies on Earth. The biblical apocalypse, war scenarios, rampaging armies get lost in some hellish void, etc. I meant to say that, if we see visions of armies, or it will confirm our biases or our superstitions that there's a rapture or whatever vision promoted by typical religions, apocalyptic scenarios. This will make people more confused in error about religion, science, what's true, as opposed to realizing that this is the sum total of the psychological subliminal advertising. MK Ultra-like social engineering, which has used our very visionary abilities against us, hence distorting our personal, self-empowering archetypes into their symbols. Why is autonomy, creativity, and the visionary imagination so discouraged in school? This technology could also be used in warfare, a la the Philadelphia experiment, and again warp the environment, cause us to hallucinate, or give us the illusion that things are disappearing. The Vions also unraveled these manifolds to a depth, creating a distortion of its ultimate potential form, which is for the universe to be a planet cosmos. Virtual galactic freeway and transportation routes, which appear according to your personal symbols, can align in various points of all planets, galaxies, dimensions, and realms to be. Everything is one planet at relative points, containing our alter egos, which we travel through in dreams, shamanism and stuff like that, from the past, future, and beyond. Kindreds or variations of both. Our alter egos are comprised of kindreds, or past lives, or ideas of past lives. Is reincarnation literal, or is it just a concept? This phenomena can expand and shapeshift the Earth, meaning planet cosmos and all its portals. This shifting field of complementary relativities allows titans, gods, giant spacecraft, planets, and the micro to become interchangeable, alluding to teleportation, shapeshifting, and interdimensional travel. But the Novans can counter this by revealing our core reality in the multi-moment, or no-time zone. We'll understand the purpose of every person, moment, action, event, whether a war, crime, suicide, success story, all feelings, impressions, whether of jealousy, admiration, and so on, and all culture, knowledge we're all leading to. They're all leading up to one eternal multi-moment for everyone, where all consciousness can explore anything with no karmic repercussions, while reconciling and healing all traumas. Ethics, ideals, concepts, philosophy will align with technology, like our limbs performing the very sensitive actions commanded by our discerning brains. I don't mean AI technology, but like spiritual, like planets, like spiritual realms. They'll be more limb-like, cosmic biology. There'll be no rifts between mind, body, spirit, and pragmatism. People will see what they're longing for, which is for intimate connections with cosmic consciousness in a self-aware way, thus using whatever appropriate technology into it in a more mindful way. The vions can absorb our thoughts if we're not mindful, thus turning us into zombies through this parasitic process. However, the novans encourage us to focus our purest thoughts so that the vions can evolve and empower us also through some mirror neuron effect. The vions shower us with corrosive chemical agents, causing us to dissolve from the inside out, but the novans shower us with biogeo building blocks, like snow, which can create soothing, nourishing glaciers and other sturdy formations. These cosmic downpours catalyze us physiologically to become like gods, self-healing. They also form igloo-like metropolises. So cities become more sentient. The vions also can create atmospheric bombs that ignite firestorms miles in expanse. The novans show us how to gain their godly perspective, which enables us to use our vortex-like mecha to suck in the friction, like a god smoking a joint. The vions overwhelm us with blinding psychedelic rays, representing the teleportation routes of the multiverse. They insist only they know what vehicles, skills, and techniques to use to master these illusion-like holograms, hence maintaining their stranglehold on the afterlife and heaven. But the novans show us that the roots, vehicles, and our interdimensional alter egos appear in whatever form that makes sense to us, according to our truest visions, sensual desires, and turn-ons. It's like designing one's own template or masterpiece in the master game. This is similar to Buddha transforming demonic assaults into peaceful things like flowers, but on an epic level. Unfathomable complex attacks are simplified into basic motions. For example, besieged, imploding battlefields is wrapped up like a soiled towel when one becomes a giant, merely wiping away the bacterial armies, no matter how fast, overwhelming their attacks are, or if they can separate. Superviruses collapse at the subatomic level when their karmic root is traced to the motions of many unforeseen origins. I forgot to mention with the vions and novans, the vions create these like special theme parks which convince you that they mastered time travel, so they create holograms of deceased loved ones and simulations of dimensions and heavens and hells and things like that, so you think you're communicating with people from the other side when they're actually simulations. But anyways, on to my final excerpt from my book called The Good News Show. It's a show that reports nothing but good news. It was written 2 years ago, 2018. So, The Good News Hour with your host, Nancy Rodriguez. The award-winning newscaster, journalist Rodriguez was part of the mainstream ABC News, but her contract suddenly expired when she aired exposés about corporate and governmental abuses. The outspoken Puerto Rican American anchor also criticized her producers for always focusing on fear-based news, which encouraged paranoia, mean world syndrome, fear culture, and racial profiling, as if instigating, farting out the very vacuum for crime, bigotry, hate, civil war, and interrelated turmoil to appear with no traceable source, where anyone can be blamed, but no one or institution could be identified. Intro. Like the cosmos, our world space is vast and largely unacquainted with. There are many good souls on earth with inspiring stories to share. Humanitarian contact has not been fully realized. There are transformative events more mystifying and magical than fear-based supernatural accounts. Their stories provide the essential pieces to our ongoing story. You'll hear nothing about redundant tragedies like the latest school shooting, late night mugging, rape, shady business dealings, or anything like that. We seek to uncover a parallel reality of change, hope, and goodwill right under our noses. Introducing Nancy Rodriguez, Mike Roberts, Renee Williams, Ben Wright with sports, and Sue Ling with the weather. Rodriguez. We begin this hazy but curious day with some intrepid teens who prove that social activism is a more effective way for self-empowerment and change, not the trendy standards imposed by peer pressure, or the belittling expectations of inner-city school officials. Tired of waiting for the assistance of school and government bureaucracies to assist with their decaying housing, student peer leaders reached out to their neighbors instead. They simply conducted humanitarian surveys, getting to know their neighbors and peers, their hopes, needs, and dreams. Cutting to a high school senior, she said, the people revealed more than even what we expected, since no one ever expressed any interest in them. We gathered our notes and summarized them into common needs and concerns. We created endless strategies around these notes, such as a labor model that even slackers could participate in. We proved that all their combined effort, including the ones with no hopes, dreams, and confidence, could still contribute meaningful work with just 1 hour apiece. So the economy was singled out into 1 hour apiece. The high schoolers concluded that tenants could collaborate with landlords, maintenance men, easing each other's workload and responsibility, contributing to genuine community in the process. Cutting to Mike. As you reported numerous times, Nancy, it's more about momentum than the choices. Already, people are finding their way merely by being given access. They automatically understand their rights rather than earn them or be educated about them, merely by treating them with dignity. People from all walks of life and from all over the world are taking their cues from this local movement, which itself corresponds to other mini-revolutions which we plan to cover in upcoming shows. This has created mass public support to other mini-revolutions, which we plan to uncover in upcoming shows. This has created mass public support, which makes it difficult for even a militarized government to crush it without creating international outrage or suspicion. Never ceases to amaze me. Yes, and by acting from a state of empowerment, the flesh and bone peoples, I mean the humans, automatically understand the systemic historical contradictions and iniquities which produce their ghettoization and artificial scarcity and artificial stupidity, as opposed to being kept at a standstill with frustration and fear-mongering by their perceived fear, blindness, differences, and ignorance. Anyhow, we turn over now to Renee with her top kind acts of the day. Thanks, Nancy. This morning, a homeless man returned a wallet to a businessman in Prudential after seeing him drop it on his way to lunch. The man was so grateful that he offered to treat him, not suspecting that he was homeless. When he asked him why did he turn down his offer, considering that it contained over $5,000, the unfortunate man said he was on his way to collect unemployment and to a job interview. He used to be a mail clerk before being laid off. Fortunately, the well-to-do businessman was the head of his postal share and offered him an interview. Charity comes in the most unexpected forms. It also provoked the entrepreneur to reevaluate his business practices, considering that his co-op caused this man to lose his job. He's attempting to create more community-oriented businesses throughout the globe of all types. Even some of the big city players may be interested in investing, in league with other grassroots economical boosts.
Also, several crime suspects, ranging from petty theft to drug dealing and to assault and battery, may be eligible for an experimental prison program. They're eligible for an experimental prison program, liberal program. This facility is more humane and resembles a Job Corps-like rehabilitation center than some maximum prison, like those you see in the Scandinavian countries. I wrote this before seeing Michael Moore's doc covering such things in detail. These prisoners in treatment are slowly but surely proven that most crimes arise from an inhumane, impersonal, alienating culture, which doesn't encourage autonomy, self-knowledge, and sensitivity to one's needs. In the words of its founding socio-psychoanthropologist, Dr. Carl Stein, even if a criminal has a genetic predisposition to crime, we realize that so-called predeterminism is a kind of wake-up call or clue for us that a criminal, sociopath, psychopath, etc., doesn't have to remain one. Our research is an inverted eugenics program in the respect that just as a Nazi-like social engineering can encourage a limited form of natural selection or breeding, we can use multidisciplinary methods in biophysics, cognitive science to encourage supernatural option or more diverse levels of diversity. Even scientific practices with a spiritual sensitivity, emphasizing the organic natures of individuals, their deepest needs, dreams, hopes, imagination. That's true data, organic data. Not just their biomechanical aspects, their rationale or biological functions. Ironically, we've learned more about human potential and biodiversity from its arrested evolutionary subjects. This implicates not just society at large and culture and our chief underdeveloped values, but also the contradiction of prior generations despite the facade of progress. Dr. Stein has made remarkable progress to the point that prisoners in treatment can interact with a community